So welcome everybody. This is the session on stories and stakes, how role-play games reach tweens with Rachel Pollari. She's the library assistant and for teen services at the Marion Public Library. Rachel cultivates programs and partnerships to help Marion tweens and teens reach their highest potential. She is currently earning her MLIS from the University of Wisconsin-Madison High School, specializing in youth services and public libraries with the intention of continuing her work with teens after graduation. So welcome, Rachel. Welcome everybody to this. I will watch the chat. You have mics, but we are going to ask you to not use them, except for possibly at the very end when we take questions. If you have a question, please put it in chat and I will watch it and keep track of those. But feel free to make comments and stuff in the chat box too. Most of you are used to doing things via Zoom because that's how we do all of our CE. So continue to do that. Welcome, Rachel.
All right. Thank you so much, Nancy. And thank you everyone who's joined us virtually today. So as Nancy said, my name is Rachel Pollari. I'm from the Marion Public Library in Marion, Iowa. And I'm going to talk to you about the incredible impact that role-play games and role-play gaming programs have had at our library in Marion. So just a few general facts. So I've got 21 slides today, including this title slide, and kind of 4 parts to the presentation. So we'll have a little bit of an introduction and then get into role-play game basics, what you need to know and have to play a role-play game. And then we're also going to get into the stories and stakes. Why do role-play games matter, and what have they done at our library specifically? And then finally, we're going to have a section on tips and resources. How do you get started with role-play games at your library? So to get started, I pulled a section from a Dungeons and Dragons character sheet to do our introduction here. So the first section here is personality traits, obviously general descriptions about me, or in case of Dungeons and Dragons, your character, that help differentiate people from each other. So I have been a full-time library assistant in teen services for just over 3 years. I've been working at the Marion Public Library for about 5. And I've been playing role-play games both personally and professionally since June of 2017. And then just a little fun fact about me, I eat the same breakfast every morning, a bowl of Cheerios and chocolate checks and peanut butter checks all mixed up in together. Ideals in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, ideals are the things that your character believes strongly in. So what do I believe strongly in? You, librarians, libraries. I want you to walk away believing in the life-changing power of role-play games and hopefully be able to bring that to your libraries. At the end of this presentation, you will understand the benefits of role-play gaming in libraries and hopefully be eager to start your own role-play game program for tweens and walk away with a plethora of resources to help you in that endeavor. Next up, bonds. Bonds are how your character is tied to the world of the game, or in this case, the world of the presentation. I listed my bond as differences because we all are serving the same age groups, but we don't all have the same resources, the same passions, spaces, staff time, etc. I'm fully aware that my library as a size G is larger than a lot of the libraries in Iowa, and so I want to make sure I honor my responsibility to offer scalable lessons, make sure the offerings of this presentation are scalable for libraries of all sizes from A all the way up to H. And finally, flaws. If you can call enthusiasm a flaw, it might be for me because I get so excited about role-play games. So as Nancy said, please type your questions in the chat box, save them up for the end and we'll get to them. But also if I go off on any tangents or am saying something that you don't understand, please ask for clarifications. I'm more than happy to elaborate or clarify. So let's get started with part 1. TTRPG basics. TTRPG stands for tabletop role-play game. And what is a tabletop role-play game? What is a role-play game? They are an epic combination of storytelling, of teamwork, and usually you roll some dice. There's no game board, no cards, no winning or losing in the traditional sense. A lot of it is improv acting and interaction and working together to solve a problem. They also, they're part of improv acting, and then someone or something kind of sets up a world or a scene, and you act and react to what's happening in the scene and to each other's characters. In this case, in this presentation, I'm mostly going to be focusing on Dungeons and Dragons, which is probably the most well-known role-play game, thanks to, you know, Stranger Things or even the latest Pixar movie, Onward. And in Dungeons and Dragons, it's the game master or dungeon master who serves as the narrator and a referee of rules, and is kind of the rules keeper and decides what happens and how players can go about accomplishing what they want to do. So as I said, in many tabletop roleplay games, you work with a group to achieve goals. Everyone has their own character, and then everyone gets to make choices as their own character. But the choices they make may or may not work depending on how the dice rolls turn out. So it adds a level of luck and unpredictability and makes it really addictive because you can never predict what's going to happen. You're living a story together. You're a co-creator, and what you do impacts everyone and the world. It's high stakes, and it's a lot of fun. Most roleplay games, many roleplay games can be played in a one session as a kind of condensed story with a beginning and an ending, but actually the majority of them tend to stretch between multiple sessions, which in Dungeons and Dragons is called a campaign, where people play the same characters session after session, and they play through entire story arcs. There's a whole bunch of different roleplay games. I've just thrown up a couple here. If you look at the Wikipedia page for tabletop roleplay game, it's so long, but I threw up a couple. It's not all like fantasy like Dungeons and Dragons. Pathfinder is another one I'm going to mention because we do play Pathfinder at my library. Those are more towards high fantasy, but Call of Cthulhu is more of a horror, eldritch horror game. H.P. Lovecraft. You've got your Starfinder, Star Wars, Doctor Who. Those all tend more towards, you know, science fiction, you know, spaceships and such. Weave is really cool. It's actually, you purchase the box and you use an app to help develop the world and your characters. And then also I did include Honey Heist, which I'll get into a little bit later. It's a super fun online free PDF you can download online, and it's only a single page. So it's pretty easy to learn and get into, but it varies from this one page, you know, document of how to play to, you know, all these books that are, you know, thick with rules and can sometimes seem a little overwhelming. So what do you need to play? Oops, excuse me. So what do you need to play Dungeons and Dragons? Dungeons and Dragons, first of all, there's several editions. The one I'm going to be talking about is the latest edition called 5th edition, which came out in 2014. There's a ton of resources and communities online that make it really accessible, which is why I chose to kind of focus in on D&D, as it's colloquially known, for this session. The items you see here are kind of the bare bones basics of what you need to play. So you need a dice set, and it's not just your typical 6-sided dice set. There's usually 7 dice, 1 4-sided, a 6-sided, an 8-sided, 2 10-sided dice, a 12-sided dice, and then this 20-sided dice like you see on the slide here. You'll also need a pencil and eraser and a character sheet where you get to create your character and find out what they're good at, and you know, get your skills and their personality and, you know, what they carry around in their backpack. You'll also need access to the rules. you'll need a space to play, and most crucially, you'll need a game master or dungeon master to lead the game and become that referee of rules and that narrator for the world. So you might be looking at this list and going like, what's this all going to cost? I am thrilled to tell you that you can get all of this for free. You can start a Dungeons and Dragons club without paying anything for materials. You don't need to purchase dice. There's dice rollers online. So if your tweens have phones, they could use that, or you could play around a computer and roll a dice, or just have one phone in the middle and, everyone uses that. You can also there is actually a little widget on Google that has all the different sides of dice. So, you don't even really need to go past Google. It's got a widget that you can use. You've got pencils and erasers, hopefully stashed somewhere around the library. Character sheets and basic rule books can be found online as PDFs, and you can print them out if you need to. If you've got a table, you've got the space you need to play. Honestly, you could probably even play on the floor if you wanted to. Often the most difficult thing out of this list to acquire is the Dungeon Master. But we're going to talk a little bit about that and hopefully empower you to, if you can't find a Dungeon Master, feel comfortable running a game. There are more items that a lot of players like to use, like gridded maps, and they get little miniatures of characters and monsters. They buy all the books that have all the rules, buy real dice, buy dice trays, so many extra things. Those are more later or personal player investments, and they're not really required, but it can be fun to pursue if you start up a program and find you have a lot of interest and have tweens and teens really getting into this program. So a little more background. How did roleplay games come to my library? As I said, I started playing both personally and professionally back in 2017. And that's actually where it started, is I first got into roleplay games at the library because during a summer reading program, we had a week-long game week that were board games and video games. And I was, just kind of supervising, playing, a few board games with people, watching people play Mario Kart. And there was a group of tweens and teens sitting and playing a board game called Betrayal at House on the Hill. And one of them was talking about how this was made by the same people who made Dungeons and Dragons. And most of the people at the table were like, oh, that sounds cool. I've never played it. I've wanted to play it. I don't know what it is, but it sounds really neat. And this one teen had the experience and had a bunch of the books and was like, hey, I'll run a game for everyone. Like, let's do it. So they started talking, oh, well, we could do it at this time, but where can we do it? Where can we do it? And I was sitting there and I overheard and I jumped in and I said, hey, you guys need a space to play. Why don't you come back to the library next Friday? We've got a room. So it really just was me overhearing and recognizing a need and jumping in and offering that. And that's how this all got started. So our Dungeons and Dragons Club was born. They came every Friday that summer to play. And due to a meeting room policy, our meeting rooms were not available for the group reserving it had to have someone over the age of 18 in the room. So of course, I didn't want to ask them to, bring along an older sibling or parent or whatever. So I was like, hey, I'll sit in, could I maybe play too? And it was awesome. I quickly fell in love with the storytelling aspect and especially the fact that I was supervising this, but it was fun and interactive, and it wasn't really me being the authority in the room. It was 100% led by this one teen who was at the time an incoming sophomore in high school. And he was the one leading, and he was the one giving out instructions, and he was the one teaching. And that was really awesome to witness. And after that summer, of course, they got busy and we started to meet a little less frequently. But in the meantime, we had been advertising our Dungeons and Dragons Club online, you know, in our library. And we had a newcomer to Marion. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, but I play the similar game called Pathfinder. And I see you have this teen program, and I've got 2 stepsons who are in middle school, and they want to keep playing. Can we host a game here at your library? And I was like, well, yes, absolutely. So he started volunteering as the game master for our Pathfinder. We started meeting every week and have played every week, almost every week since 2017. He actually now leads 2 games every week because the demand was grew so that we couldn't just leave it at one program. So now he leads a game on Tuesday evenings for the middle schoolers, and then on Wednesday evenings for the high schoolers. We started playing in that meeting room, like I said, but now we actually play in our new teen space. We just got a whole bunch of space for teens, and we just have a couple of tables and chairs pushed together back there. You can sort of see it circled in the picture. So they're playing in the library. Anyone browsing books can, you know, hear them and get excited and be like, what's going on, and learn a little more about the program. They're not sequestered away in a meeting room. So this is how we started roleplay gaming at the library. But the real question is, why have roleplay games stayed? And that leads us to our stories and stakes, which is basically, why do roleplay games matter? Why have roleplay games stayed at our library and been so consistently popular and beloved by these groups of kids? If I had to give you one answer, why roleplay games matter, it would be in this photo. Roleplay games matter because of the communities they create and the bonds that are born of the shared experience of playing together. So this is a photo of our Pathfinder club back before it was split into 2 groups. This is Halloween of 2018. These tweens and teens decided that for Halloween, our game was on Halloween, we were going to dress up as our characters. So we've got on the left-hand side is Gork, the orc, and his player decided that because Gork had a low intelligence score, that he was not going to dress up because he didn't understand the concept of Halloween. So that's Gork. Next to him, we've got Thea, who is a ranger and likes to wear pretty dresses. Then in the middle, we've got Branch with a leafy crown on his player's head. And his player was really excited when he found out there was a spell in the game that allowed him to actually turn himself into a tree. He got really excited about that. And then in the middle there, that's me as my character Reza. And then crouching down on the floor, we've got Marcielle, who's a witch, who has a little spider that I don't think you can really see in her hand. But in the game, she has a little spider that follows her around. And then in the hat and back, you've got Radish, who's a really fun, flamboyant character. And then back there in the ninja costume, you have Thamic, who is sneaky and great with bow and arrow. So at this particular event where we all dressed up, you can see some snacks in the background. We provided some basic adventures, grub, you know, crackers, cheese and meat, apples, and then I made blue Kool-Aid and called it Healing Potion Punch. And then we ate and took some photos and had a good time. And then we actually played for a couple hours as our characters in costume. And it was really awesome. And now they do that pretty much every year. And you can tell just by looking at the photo, like this sense of community that's been created. Other examples that talk about the impact of this community. Gork, the one on the left, he actually, a couple months after this photo was taken, left the state during winter break. and he was really upset that he was going to have to miss a couple games of Pathfinder. So we actually worked with him and his mom, and he was our very first virtual program attendee. He Skyped in from out of state and played with us for 2 hours. He had his dice and was able to, using the magic of video conferencing, just like we are now, was able to hear what was going on, and that was really awesome. He wanted to play so badly, and we found a way for him to play, and he was very grateful. Another example of the impact that these kinds of programs can have, Radish, the one in the black feathery hat, had joined us just a couple months before this photo was taken. They just moved here from actually out of the country. And after joining Pathfinder Club, his players said, I normally have to hang out with my older sister and all our cousins her age. It's so nice to hang out with people my own age for once. I'm so glad you have this. So that's just another example of the impact of and how quickly playing these games together can form these bonds. And really make an impact and a difference in these tween and teens' lives. So, as I said, role-play games, they're really great for building community. What else are they really great at doing? Another story I'm going to tell you, I call it the arrow story. And if you've been to any other presentations I give, I know I've told this story a couple times, like at ILA, but we are playing Pathfinder, and the Dungeon Master, Derek, had set up this imaginary room that we were all picturing our characters were in. And there were 4 columns, and there was this floating coffin that was 50 or 60 feet above us in this really tall room, and we were trying to get the coffin down to us or to get up to the coffin somehow. So one of the players thought, well, maybe you have to hit the coffin with something. So he said, okay, I'm going to go stand in the middle of the room and look right up at the coffin, and I'm going to shoot an arrow up at it. And our Dungeon Master was like, okay, you want to stand right in the middle, right underneath, and shoot an arrow straight up? And the player was like, yes. And so player, rolled the dice and shot an arrow straight up. And what goes up must come right back down. And so the arrow went up, and then the arrow came right back down and hit him on the head, and caused a little damage to the character's health. And a few other people came and tried a few things, and that player said, I want to try hitting it with an arrow again. And Derek's like, are you standing in the same place? Are you doing? He's like, nope, I'm right here, I'm standing in the same place, I'm gonna shoot an arrow again. Same thing happened. Arrow went up, came back down, took a little damage. We try a few more things, we think we're getting a little close, and then the player speaks up again and says, I'm gonna shoot an arrow at it again, but this time I'm gonna take a couple steps back. So roleplay games, are really awesome for sharpening problem solving and communication skills. That's just a classic. He gets hurt a couple times, and he has to figure out how to do what he wants to accomplish without getting hurt. And he figured it out. He took a couple steps back, he shot the arrow, and it hit the coffin, and it worked. That was memorable story, and a great example of why roleplay games really have an impact. Another thing roleplay games can do is they encourage teamwork and active listening. There is going to be a link to a Google Drive that has a bunch of different resources, and you'll get a link to that at the end of the presentation. But one of the things I have included is
I think we've temporarily lost Rachel. Hello, Rachel, if you can hear me. Your connection seems to be locking up. We've had that issue a couple times. looks like I'm able to see action going in some of the videos, so I don't think it's on our end.
Yeah, and I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Oops, and it looks like she might be trying to log back in. Everybody, please hold on. We'll see if we can get her back.
It looks like she's back in. Hi, Rachel. Can you hear us? Oh, you're actually muted right now.
Oh, no. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you've kind of locked up on us a couple times. The first time only lasted like a couple of seconds, but that second time looks like it was more fun.
Okay. Do you remember where I was when I locked up?
It was only for like 20 seconds.
20 seconds. Okay.
Yeah.
You had told the story about the kid with the arrow.
Great.
Finished that, moved on.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So, yep, that's just fine then. Oops. Okay, let's go back a little bit. So yes, sorry about that, technology. So yes, that arrow story, roleplay games, and especially in that instance, they sharpen problem solving and communication skills. That's a great example of that. The next thing roleplay games do are they encourage teamwork and active listening. One example that I have for that is there were a group of players who came across a talking tree in the middle of a crossroads, and these characters are trying to figure out which way they have to go, and the tree knows, and the tree can tell them, but before he wants the players to give him something beautiful or do something kind for him. And so the players have to work together and listen to each other and figure out what they want to do or give to this tree that will get the information that they need to keep going. And I ran this a couple times for different groups of tweens. One group decided they were going to take some rope that they have and make a fancy bow and tie it around the tree's trunk. Which was really, that's one beautiful thing, one kind thing to do. My favorite, one group decided that they were going to give the tree a haircut. So they had to work to kind of hoist each other up and use their sword to kind of trim the edges of the tree to give them a haircut. So it's all about teamwork and, listening to each other and figuring out what they can do together. Another example is the picture that I have is from a game that I called Mr. Champion Sandcastle's Sandcastle Championship. It was, they wanted a beach game. And so we were playing a beach game, and I actually got some kinetic sand and said, okay, your players or your characters are doing this, but you guys have to do it too. So they actually had to work as a team to design this sandcastle in, a short amount of time. And then, we rolled some dice to see how well it did. And role play games are a lot of, imagination and, imagining what's happening to your characters, but sometimes you can bring in the really fun kind of tactile physical elements to actually bring them together and do more things together. So that was a fun game. One other thing, there are a lot of reasons why roleplay games matter, but one other thing is they offer a safe play space for exploring identities. This is especially important. Obviously, libraries are for everyone, and in our games we are very committed to making sure that we reinforce characters' gender identities and pronouns in the game, even if they don't necessarily match the gender identity or pronoun that a player is using. And so one example is Radish, who you saw earlier in the feathery hat. The player uses she, her pronouns, but Radish uses he, him pronouns. And sometimes when players are talking, they'll look at the player and say, oh, she's going to go over and do this. And we always make sure to correct it and say, no, Radish is doing it. He's going to do it. Because by doing that within the space of the game, it also helps reinforce players' gender identities and pronouns in terms of, you know, the choices, the choice that they, the pronouns that they choose, and the gender that identity that they choose. It's been really impactful to see that reinforcement of gender, and it really does a great job of teaching in a non-intrusive way, and also gives players an opportunity to explore different genders and different identities through the guise of role-play gaming. And finally, but not finally, just finally for this presentation, this slide, role-play games are awesome because they provide such great opportunities for leadership. As I had said before, the very first Dungeons & Dragons game was led 100% by teens. And even since then, Derek, our Pathfinder Dungeon Master, there are a few weeks sometimes where he can't make it, and those tweens and teens always step up and say, oh, I'll run a game, or, you know, let's do this, or what if we did this? And so it's really cool to see them have an opportunity to take that leadership role. And one really relevant current example is as soon as we announced that our library was going to be closed to the public during this whole crisis, within a couple hours, I had 3 emails in my inbox from my Pathfinder kiddos saying, how can we keep playing? Can we play online? What can we do? Can you give us Derek's email so we can talk to him and figure out a way to do this? And I said, absolutely, let me get you all the information you need. You can do what you need to do to get this going. If you have any problems, let me know, but you guys got this. And they did. They figured out a way to play online with each other while the library is closed. So they're continuing that. They're need that sense of community and need those games. And it's clear that it's having an impact. So that's why they matter. So hopefully, you know, hearing those stories, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to start this at my library. I need to get this community going. So these are the tips and resources that I can give you that will hopefully help you start this program at your library. As I said earlier, there will be a link to a Google Drive that includes a ton of resources, including a pre-made adventure that I wrote that you're more than welcome to use. I've used it at least 3 times with tweens, middle schoolers. There's also a character creation tutorial that is out there that step-by-step tells you how to create a character in Dungeons & Dragons. I've got a whole bunch of pre-made characters you can use and more. So let's get into it. So when you're getting started, as I said earlier as well, sometimes the hardest thing can be finding someone to lead the game. So there are kind of your 2 options. After assessing your space and your staff capacity, it's the biggest decision you're going to have to make. And there are pros and cons to finding someone outside of the library or finding someone other than yourself and doing it yourself or having a staff member do it. So if you're looking to find a game master or dungeon master, that's great, because if you can find someone, it takes time off of staff, programming time and planning time. And it's especially great for those leadership opportunities if you can find a teen or a tween who's willing to do it. But as I said, it's hard to find. A lot of people really just want to play, and they're not ready or don't think they're ready for that leadership role. And if you're coming at it completely new and no one has played before, they're not going to be super enthusiastic about jumping in. You might have someone who is, but it can be hard to find people like that. And also bringing someone in from the outside, their idea of what they want from their game might conflict with library policies. Maybe they really want to do something that is maybe a little more gruesome or violent than you are comfortable with at your library. And that could be an issue you'd have to talk through. If you decide or can't find someone and kind of realize you have to run your own game, your advantage is you understand your audience perfectly, and you understand your library and your library policies and what's okay, what's not okay. You come in with that just inherent knowledge. And also the advantage is every participant then gets to play, and they don't have to worry about the pressure or the leadership if they've never done it before. And hopefully you could get them to that point, but at least at the beginning, everyone gets a chance to play. The downside is it does require an understanding of the game mechanics of whatever game you're running. Even if you don't know much or anything about Dungeons and Dragons or any role play games, as you're listening to me rave about them, I promise you can run a game with some really basic prep work. I promise we'll get you through it. The disadvantage, again, though, is that does require even more planning time, extra planning time. So you've decided whether you found a GM or you're going to run, a game yourself. What are your next steps? So if you found a game master or dungeon master, you'll have to have that conversation and communicate library policies and expectations. You'll have to talk with them and set the program length and the attendance capacity for the program. You'll do your normal scheduling, marketing, and preparing of materials. If you decide that you're going to run your own game, I would highly recommend, if you've never played, watch or listen to someone else play, or better yet, play in a game yourself. There are a bunch of streams and podcasts online that we'll get into. I've got some resources for those as well, where you can actually watch people play. And while it's not necessarily going to teach you the rules, it is going to teach you the feel of how it works and what happens, and how checks are made and when to roll dice and all of that. So it's an excellent way to do that. And a lot of people are playing now. So if you can find a game to play in, definitely take that chance, take that step outside your comfort zone and enjoy that. If you decide, yep, you're going to run your own game, you will have to find a short pre-made adventure and familiarize yourself with it. You can also create your own, but that again takes a lot more familiarity. So finding a short adventure, there's a bunch of resources online. Again, I'm going to link you to those, so don't worry about that. And I'm giving you the one that I wrote as well. And just like if you'd found a DM outside of the library, you'll have to set your attendance capacity, schedule, market, prepare, all those things. I'm going to talk a little more in depth about a couple of these things. So setting program length and attendance capacity. As far as length goes, I'd recommend no more than 2 hours for your first game, or until you've got a particularly dedicated and mature group. My Pathfinder teens, they've been playing for 3 years. We tried 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours, and it was still just a little bit too long. They've got a lot going on. Their attention spans are not always there. So 2 hours is a really good length, enough time to get into the adventure, but not too much time to kind of get bored or have other things to do. As far as program and attendance capacity goes, it depends entirely on how many players the dungeon master can handle. And that can be a really hard mental hurdle to overcome, because, we're used to this mantra, library programs are supposed to be for everyone, teen programs, every teen should be welcome. If 10 people want to play and we only have one person who can run a game, all 10 people should still be able to play. Isn't that right? That would be, in an ideal world, the best solution. Unfortunately, the more players you have in one game, the more difficult it is, especially if you have an inexperienced, or even just as far as age, a teen or tween game master. in Dungeons and Dragons, most of the time it's kind of a free-for-all, but when you're fighting something, you do take turns, so it's not everyone doing something at once. And the more people there are, the more tedious it can get waiting for it to come around to your turn. And especially when you're teens, people will pull out their phones and, start, showing each other something on YouTube. They start getting inside conversations. It can be hard for everyone to focus, and it just doesn't feel really productive. Personally, I would recommend that if you can swing it, no more than 6 players per game master or dungeon master. If you have a lot of interest, hopefully, and it's actually an issue that you have more, interest than you have game masters or capacity to run it. There are a couple suggestions that we've done. Our Pathfinder Club does require pre-registration. It's not drop-in. And we do have people on a wait list. And it kind of stinks because you want to accommodate these people, but our GM has said, I don't want any more than 6 teens plus me as a librarian at the table. So it's really comes down to that. Your second option is, of course, to find more game masters and dungeon masters. Again, easier said than done, but that would be a great way to do it, especially if you can encourage teens and tweens into that leadership role. You can also run the same game or same story more than once for different groups. So I did this last summer for tweens at the Marion Library. I had 2-day sessions, and I had 3 separate ones, and each one of those sessions was running the exact same game. And they all turned out a little differently because each group is different and have their own plans and humor. But that is also an option if you've got that capacity. Additionally, that communication of library policies and expectations should be a part of the preparation that you do. Here's the tea, to quote the teens. If you set clear expectations going into the game, and you invite all players to contribute to that conversation, everyone's going to have a lot more fun because you've set the boundaries before. This is something I had wished I'd known about and implemented from the very first game, because it would have saved some frustrations and some tears in groups because the boundaries weren't set and things went too far for some people and we hadn't had that conversation. It's everyone's chance to set boundaries, the players and you, and it's a good time to remind players of library policies. I call it the session 0 conversation, and I put it in nice bright coloring. And I have actually, in the Google Drive, another resource, I've included word for word the exact script of this conversation that I use. And I liken it to everyone sitting at a table and you're trying to decide what to eat. And maybe some people are like, I really want potatoes, but you have to dig in a little more. What kind of potatoes? Are you talking French fries? Are you talking baked potatoes? And you're discussing this and someone says, wait a minute, I'm allergic to potatoes. We can't even have potatoes. So it's sitting down with your group and deciding what's okay, what's not. What are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? And it's a super important conversation to have. And I have it not only in the games that I have with tweens and teens at the library, but also in my personal games as well. Anytime there's a new player, even if it's just one new player, we always have this conversation and touch base. And it's, super important. So would definitely recommend preparing that before starting your game or using mine. Other considerations you may have, character creation is super fun. They love doing it. They love being creative with it, coming up with names and personality traits, but it is also pretty time consuming. For Dungeons and Dragons, expect it with a group of tweens to take at least 1 to 2 hours, sometimes a couple sessions if you're just doing 2 hours sessions at a time. I would recommend giving them pre-made characters if you're just, trying off this one-time game. And then if they really are into it and want to keep going, they can make their own. We do that with Pathfinder. Every new person who ends up joining a Pathfinder club plays a pre-made character the very first time, just to make sure that they enjoy this and it's something they want to keep doing. And then the next time they come and join, they get to make their own character. What about violence? As I kind of said earlier, sometimes the violence can be a bit of an issue. Roleplay games were originally designed as battle simulators. Dungeons and Dragons was a war game, basically. One important thing to consider is and communicate with whoever's leading the game. Do you want these enemies that they're fighting and probably killing to be humanoids? Do you want them to be mimicking killing humans and elves and people with intelligence? Or do you want to keep it strictly monster? Are they killing monsters and devils and stuff like that? My teens love battles. I could never take away the battle aspect of the game, but also consider that you don't have to fight something to find a solution. It's oftentimes more creative and more engaging if they can figure out a way to solve something without having to kill anything or harm anything. So it doesn't have to be about fighting. There can be peace-driven solutions too. Finally, how do I teach people how to play when I'm new too? Just say, take a breath and just jump in. Really, you kind of just have to let go of your inhibitions and say, okay, let's try this, let's do it, let's learn together. One other thing I found that, again, I'm including in the resources is a cheat sheet of what players can do the very first time they play, or even throughout as they get more experience. Is still a good reference to have. So there's examples of actions that you as your character can do. They can talk, they can move, kind of like a video game. It's just all in their imagination. And then there's also an action you can do, which is just to listen. If you're not sure what you want to do, if your character, you're not really sure how to play or don't really want to do anything or don't think your character has anything to offer, listen. Just listen to the other people. That'll help generate ideas, and it's also just a good skill to have. So we're running just I see the time, we're getting there. One other suggestion I have for new librarians trying to start this new at their library, if you're intimidated by that rule book, by Dungeons and Dragons, and you're like, I don't think I can handle that right now, these one-page roleplay game systems are made by Grant Howitt. He provides them free online. There's Honey Heist and Crash Pandas. Honey Heist is a game where everyone plays a bear and you're trying to steal a important honey-related artifact. And you just roll up what kind of bear you are, what your role is in this heist. It's like a bank heist, but you're bears and it's honey. And there's even a bonus hat table, so you can roll and see what kind of hat your bear is wearing. And it's a lot of fun. One page, rules for everybody, and it's simple and easy to get into. I ran one for some teens and they had a blast. It was set at the Berrien Public Library and it was a good time. The other game he has is called Crash Pandas. You literally play a raccoon who's street racing, and you have one dice, and as you're driving you decide based on what number you choose, it's which way the car goes. So you've got one player and you go around, and so one player says, I'm going to accelerate, and then the next player says, oh, I'm going to turn right, but then the next player says, oh, I'm going to turn left. And so you're raccoons driving a car. It makes sense, but it's so much fun, so funny. And it's a really lighthearted way to get into roleplay games without needing to deep dive into the intensity of Dungeons and Dragons and all those rules. Finally, I did also, as part of my course for reference and information services class at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, had to create a LibGuide. And I made one called A Librarian's Guide to DMing with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And it's got a lot of what I've showed you in this presentation. It's got resources and links on how to get started. It links you to the Gamer Librarian Facebook group. There's a committee of gamer librarians through ALA, and it's got a bunch of content and resources. The online generators give you like name generators and map generators and all sorts of fun things. Learn by Example gives you, I've listed 4 really cool podcasts and online streams that I really enjoy that you can get into and learn by example. There's one called Spell Check that is actually 6 young adult authors. They play Dungeons and Dragons together and release a podcast. And those episodes are actually some shows can run pretty long, upwards of 3 or 4 hours an episode. That one's a lot shorter and a little more easier to get into. So this is a great resource, if I do say so myself, that can help you dig into a little more of that content as well. So finally, thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions. Here's the link to the Google Drive, and you can also scan the QR code below. And please do reach out to me. My email's down there, rpollari@marionpubliclibrary.org. If you ever have any questions or need any more resources or just want to talk something through. Additionally, if any of you are like, hey, let's get a group of librarians together and see what D&D is all about, I am more than happy to run a game. Just email me and we'll figure it out. So thank you very much, and I'll take any questions.
Maybe an option for ILA.
Yeah.
You can take over trivia night. Yeah.
Yes.
And do Dungeons and Dragons instead. I did grab some questions that came up throughout your presentation. So for Honey Heist, somebody had said, is it still a one-page RPG? Did it get developed further?
No, it was designed to be one page.
Okay.
Yep.
And then is there or are there ready-made templates or game starters for smaller games to get kids familiar with the games?
Yeah,
other than the one page.
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons sells a couple. They have a starter set that has character sheets and a rule book and actually a set of dice as well. And I know they also recently released an essentials kit. That's the same thing, basically. Both come with pre-made adventures as well for the Dungeon Master. And so those, I believe, are usually $20 to $30, and it's a box, and that's a good investment if you are really thinking about getting into this.
Okay, this one might have been answered. I'm not sure. Does it get too noisy? We don't have an enclosed space in the main library. Our meeting space is in the basement, but we don't have the staff to man it for an open meeting like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it can get noisy, especially if they're really into it and something cool happens. They can get really excited. I was honestly expecting a lot more noise when we moved our Pathfinder club from the enclosed meeting room to the library proper back in the teen space. But we just made sure to communicate that we were moving to a new space and it was going to require a little more volume awareness. And so far, everyone's done great. You just might have to make sure you set that boundary quickly and keep on it. Yeah, I mean, you're just going to have to kind of evaluate that for your own space, but it's possible, and it can work with an appropriate noise level.
Yeah, so I think this one was answered. Do they have a gender neutral option? And I think participants answered that one, but if not, if you can put it in the chat again. And then the last one I saved, and I know some other ones are popping up. For kids who have never played but may be interested, would you suggest inviting them to watch a campaign? Would it be possible to have a D&D open house, like have a group demonstrate so others can learn about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that's definitely a way to, if you've got more interest than you have capacity, if they want to come and watch, you just have to be careful. We have had a few instances where someone will watch, but then they'll slowly kind of start making suggestions or interjecting. And so you do have to be clear with those boundaries, because you want to make sure that everyone at the table is able to focus and not necessarily like peer pressured from outside information. But definitely, as long as everyone's on the same page about that, invite people to come and watch and see if it's something they're interested in.
Okay, and then she said, just wondering if you have other ideas to kick it off.
Other ideas, how?
That I'm not sure about.
Yeah. As far as, getting them engaged or like doing more of an open house. Yeah, I'd have to think about that. Feel free to reach out to me via email, and I'll do some thinking on that and see if I can come up with some creative answers.
Okay, and then these are newer questions. Is there always a library staff person in the space when the clubs are playing?
There usually is. Because we've moved out into the library proper for a Pathfinder club, we talked about it, and I decided that I would continue to play every week with the middle schoolers, because that young age group can, they're not necessarily as mature, and things can get easily misinterpreted, and they're still figuring things out. And it's good to have kind of a second person on hand to answer questions, and also sometimes, prompt them or support them in that capacity. But our high school group, they play out there, and there's no library staff person present. I would advise, if you can, especially if you've got a teen who's leading the group, sit in at least for a few sessions, because sometimes they don't know how to navigate certain boundaries, and they're learning too. And having you there, you don't necessarily need to be their leader, but reinforcing their leadership is sometimes something that can come up. So I would say, if you can swing it, a library staff person is usually a good thing to have for the younger groups.
Okay. And then there was another question that I think you answered. You always play the game with the kids. You pretty much answered that in your response there. How do they click on the link? They can't, probably from your PowerPoint. So if you could put the link to your Google Drive and your tiny URL in the chat, that would be lovely. And somebody asked for that. How would you suggest hosting a role-playing game virtually? Or program virtually, sorry.
Sure. So there are a couple online tools that you can use. You could do it through Zoom if you wanted to. Really, video chat and voice chat is pretty much all you need, as long as they all have access to the resources. There are a couple other I tend to use for my personal games. I use Discord, and I bet a lot of teens also use Discord for various things. That's got a video and audio chat option. And then there's also Roll20, ROLL 20, and that's actually an online tool built for people playing role-play games, and it's got a whole bunch of features. It's got maps and actually virtual dice you can roll in the actual game room itself. So if you look into that, it would really just be making sure that everyone who needs to has access to it, and that it is a little different because it's a little easier to talk over people, and if someone's audio isn't working, you might not realize it. So you just have to be ready to deal with possible technical issues that happen, but it's definitely possible, and there are tools out there that can help you with it.
Okay, what are the best ways to know if this is what your teens or tweens want? Any ideas?
Ask them. If they don't know, but are open to it, maybe just run a game for them, or, talk about it, or try it out. But I would say, just asking them and saying, hey, have you ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons? Or, approaching it even from, did you see the latest Pixar movie, Onward? That was based on Dungeons and Dragons. Does that sound cool? Do you want to try it? Do you like Stranger Things? Let's play Dungeons and Dragons. Just talking to them, just asking and talking to them, or just giving it a try. And sometimes, in this case, having low attendance numbers for something like this is actually a good thing. So even if you don't get a lot of interest, you might make a real impact in a couple teens' lives.
So I think the last question I'm seeing, and we're getting very close to the end, is you said no more than 6 people per game. In your clubs, is it usually the same 6 kids every time?
Yes, it is. Pretty much all those people you saw in the photo in Pathfinder Club are still the ones that are playing today. We've had a few of them leave, and then a few other people have come in, but otherwise it is the same group week to week. And that really does make a difference with community and, building that kind of camaraderie between each other. But yes, it is the same every week.
Okay, well, that is all of the questions we have.
Great.
I am going to post the link to the survey, though Scott will also put up that message.
Great.
So if this is the last session you're going to be watching, we ask that you do go in and do a survey. And thank you so much, Rachel, for doing it. It was really informative. It was a great presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Please, like I said, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. And yeah, hopefully you can get some role-play gaming started at your library.
And as a reminder, we did record this one. So if you missed some of the chat, and Rachel may want to go back and look at it so she can see all the comments people posted, because I'm guessing she was too busy.
Thank you everyone for answering.
For the question, do we need to do the survey both days? No, wait until you're totally done, and it will lead you through all of the different sessions that you attended. You'll get to pick them and then get the certificate that lists them all. So you should be good.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for attending. It was a great turnout.